and then was no longer in business, if they are still eligible for the complete payment, given that there are other farmers who got a complete payment and are no longer shipping milk.
Yeah, I mean, so we, again, will need to make a recommendation to the Appropriations Committee by the end of the week on whether we want to, suggest money for those farms, and if so, how much?
And specific farmers.
Yes, and thinking about, how that last farm should be treated.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to make a bill, or do you just?
The budget adjustment is a bill, so it's there as and it's mostly, I say mostly, but it's dollars like a budget,
Yeah.
but there's also language so it won't be the only language, but the bill exists.
It's a recommendation.
Well, the governor recommends, and then the House uses that as a template to start with, and then it'll go to the Senate just like any other bill. Yeah. So, yeah, anybody have any other thoughts on this?
Okay.
What's that?
The organic?
Yeah, the organic. Yeah.
There's other circumstances to that.
Wait, what was that, Ronnie?
There's other circumstances of that fifth farm.
Got it.
So what?
So you feel like that fifth farm shouldn't be included, and it should just be the four that sort of butted up against the deadline. Okay.
And what's your reasoning? I'm curious to.
You won't talk about it live.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's fair to acknowledge that there are some exceptions. There's some gray areas, and probably inevitable. We certainly could recommend to appropriations that there be money for helping out farms that didn't get anything. And then say, in addition to that, there's a farm that didn't get everything that it would have gotten, except that the fund ran out of money, and explain, a little bit more without, naming anybody or, identifying who it is, a little bit more about the situation. And so that's one option.
Leaving it up to them, just giving them the facts.
But if we leave out that fifth farm, then are we back to just 126,000 that we need to ask for?
Yeah. Well, that's the amount anyway.
Because if we put the fifth farm in, we're up to 252. Got it. Okay.
It was interesting, Josie, that the agency was just saying that even they didn't think through all these sort of contingencies. Like some farms are actually seasonal, which I didn't really think about. Like drying their cows off. Like a lot of grass-fed farms, right? A period where they're not shipping milk every day or every other day, right? They have really seasonal shipping. So they did that specific farming model didn't fit the statutory language.
Oh, got it.
Adapt.
And there are limited resources. I think that's the other thing to remember. I mean, it might be that everybody agrees on whatever recommendation we come forward with. There are limited resources. So whatever we might think is the right approach here, ultimately it's not up to just us.
Right.
And even there, the statute said until all the funds were exhausted. So to some extent, even though it was
Yeah,
bad luck for those four farms, the agency, didn't do anything tricky, and then they just ran out of money.
right, yeah. It could have been more than 4 farms, and it could have
Right.
been. And we also had a contingency if there was excess money at the end, so we envisioned, a possibility where there would be money left over,
What was the contingency then?
to put it into another grant program.
Because of the application based,
It was.
there was
That
a
was-
possibility that maybe a number of farms didn't apply and then, yes.
Or we're eligible but didn't apply, or weren't eligible. Yeah. Okay,
Just as an interesting point that I was thinking about was that 123 farms received the funding, and that is coincidentally the total organic areas that are also left in the state was 123.
Oh my
I don't
God.
know if that was
Coincidence?
as a result of the fact that those are the ones who financially.
But then are the 4 that didn't make the grant funding, they're not included in that 123.
Well, I think that
That's where
I think
I'm,
that's actually the answer because we heard that,
Yeah.
so that at least some of those 4 are still shipping. So that means that there are a handful that got the money and went out and there are a handful that didn't get the money.
And are still in.
That does.
That
Right.
Didn't even apply.
Right.
right, it's the 2 that didn't apply.
Uh-huh. So there were 129, 2 didn't take it, right, okay.
right, there were right, and then 123 applied, got it, and then 4 didn't.
Mm-hmm. 127 applied, only 123.
Right.
And of those 123, one of them had partial payment.
Right, which no one will talk about on camera. That's
Right.
Quite understand.
I think it's okay to talk about the fact that there was a partial payment. The concern is identifying one particular business and.
Yeah.
And just coincidentally, the partial payment was because that's when the money ran out. But that's mixed up in this whole thing, even though it's a totally different issue.
Yeah, okay. Well, do you want to spend some more time thinking about it? We do really need to let appropriations know tomorrow, by the end of the week, so tomorrow, on any of our recommendations. And
Where is the?
we'll have some more time to talk about it, but yeah, Mike.
I wonder if there's a way to not reveal the specifics of the business or the things that people are feeling uncomfortable discussing in the room, but hear anything more that, it's obvious that NOFA has a different perspective. And I just didn't know if they wanted to tell us any more about why that's their perspective or. It's just feeling like we don't have without being able to discuss and I understand the reasons why we don't want to do that. It just feels like we don't have a great way as a committee to sort of move forward and say, this is the number, or this is the number, and this is why. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to work through
Maybe
this.
ask if there's anything else they'd like to share.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody feel differently or second that?
Second that.
Second that.
Does that mean more testimony?
I think so, and it might be written, it could be, I think it needs to be something public though.
Mm-hmm.
So if, Sidonia, if you want to reach out to NOFA and see whether there's anything else they'd like to share with us beyond what they've already provided. Okay. Who was going to be sort of I got volunteers or appointed people to each of the areas of the BAA. It was the dairy.
It's the scary piece. Actually feeling a passion for the loggers today though, so.
Who's the logger?
While we're talking about BA then, let me ask about that. We heard that testimony. We're not planning to take any more testimony from logging loggers. Is there a general feeling that, I think I heard some thoughts the other day, but if we're going to put a letter out to appropriations that we include some financial support for the logging community.
So just to clarify, the ask that we got from the loggers was not for a number. It was that any qualifications for future funds that they be adjusted so that loggers were
Yeah.
eligible, right?
Well,
Or so that the kinds of losses they're facing are eligible because the kinds of losses they're facing are not easily quantified.
and I think we do need to quantify it though. So we did not get a number. Jed can, part of what I would hope that Jed would do is come back with a number. I've had some conversations just to try and get a sense of how many different applicants might there, qualified applicants might there be, and then what kind of losses did they have, and what would a number be that actually was reasonable? So, yeah, ready.
Didn't, Sam Lincoln and that guy from Maine looking for some funding to start a program? Come out to join into the Maine guys.
I think that, I don't know that they're looking for money for that. I think that as private businesses, they are, and I may be wrong, but I think that as private businesses, they are, maybe already have joined that association.
Maybe, I was thinking there was some.
They, yeah, I know that in the conversation we had, there was also discussion about other programs that they're hoping might be addressed in a bill that would also involve some funding. Yeah, John.
Was there talk, in addition to what Mike just said, of some sort of grant program to make up for lost days of work or lost revenue this past year?
So that was part of their request. They are also hoping that long-term, there may be programs that can address just the larger fact that weather is keeping them from doing their work, not just flooding events, but weather in general, much more than it used to in the past. And something that, I know we talked about that bill and haven't yet even heard it, so we'll come back to it, but that's part of their, if you look back at what they had printed up an agenda for the session.
Taking materials or machines to be able to operate in these sort of
Yeah.
extreme weather.
So the agriculture grants that went out through BGAP were qualified because they considered the plants that were in the ground as inventory. So they lost inventory, and inventory qualified under that program. And it was not as going to be as easy to do that. Lost time in the woods, it was really just revenue that was lost.
Or trees that are still growing.
We're having a discussion about logging without your perspective here. You're glad you're back because that's fine. Yep. We're just chatting about the budget adjustment again, and we talked about the organic dairy discussion that we had earlier and funding for that, and then again about some funding potentially for logging. And we need to wrap this up by tomorrow, so I can touch base with you afterwards just to bring you up to speed, but we want to try and nail down some language and a dollar amount too. Yeah,
I just don't think we can nail down a dollar amount when they didn't give us one. And it feels really big and open-ended to say we had a crap year without a dollar amount.
so we can ask them, and Jed, that can be you, to give that some more thought and then come back in and just give us something tomorrow, how it's arrived at. Yeah, I think that's fair.
You know, I had some questions because I met and David was remote, but there were a few of us. And that could have been in early August in Danny Fitzko's office over. I know both Dana, Allard Lumber, and Sam Lincoln, myself, maybe one other logger were there, but I wasn't aware of this survey. And I know a lot of loggers that weren't aware that, you know, that it was an outreach to see who would.
I think that part of the challenge is that the losses that they estimated through the survey that we heard about the other day were, you know, enormous and far exceeding the total amount of money there is in the budget adjustment.
Right.
Yeah.
So trying to determine what's a reasonable number here is going to be very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just like, you know, when we tackled the organic dairy losses when the market collapsed, right, in conjunction with rising feed and fuel prices, was a, you know, triple threat. Almost every little logger was affected similarly. But if you have 37 employees and are a multi-tiered, you know, horizontally diversified operation, and I can use an example, but I don't have to. Yeah, and you're used to, you know, harvesting 1 million feet a month or 700,000 feet a month or more. Suppose someone who typically might harvest 100,000 or 40,000 feet a month. And in my case, I'm sure I was down from late June through the end of the year, probably 60 or 75%. All I did is make firewood and deal with some health issues, you know. There was no work to do. And I'd say that was very typical. But when you're talking about a big company, which there are few in this state, you know, their accountants could put out these reports and say, yeah, I lost $500,000. So anyway, it's complicated. You know, I obviously, for the industry, they were hurt badly. And they have always, like farmers, been subject to, you know, the impacts of weather, frost, and anyway. So I'll limit my thoughts to that, with the exception that farming, there's a kind part in most Vermonters' hearts, whether they've been in Vermont for a month, a year, or their whole life, for farming. There isn't a warm spot anywhere really for logging historically. There may be an underbelly trade, and even though I think it's the biggest honor, one of the big honors of my life to survive a lifetime doing it. And I have a real affection for the people. But, you know, I am really pleased this committee is willing to consider something that's fair and responsible. But,
Why don't you,
well,
let's have you, Jed, follow up with that, with those folks. And
I will.
yeah, let's see if we can somehow, and it was the same with the ag community too. There was no sense that we were gonna compensate for all of the losses. But they did try and quantify things, so, yeah,
And, okay.
yeah. just-
If we get money to loggers, then how are we gonna start a grant program? Who's gonna run it? How are we gonna fund it? Have we talked to, there are a lot of pieces that need to happen.
And we don't have to do too much of that. We can put in the bill that it'll be run through the agency of
FPR.
probably Commerce, because they're the ones who did the BGAP. And then, that's their job, is to figure out how to run.
So they'll run that, okay.
Yeah, in the same way that they would be, that, as I say, that's their job. We did, in a similar way last year with the organic dairy money, we didn't sweat the details. We managed to pass that off.
So I'm seeing, the forestry industry is quite wide with lots of segments in there, right? There's mills, there's logging, there's transportation. From the testimony we've heard so far, it seems that the mills might be, I'm looking at you to check in, but it seems like the mills might be the most delicate piece in that, with all the closures and especially with the testimony we took. Perhaps if we were to isolate what limited funds we do have to one segment of that industry, focusing it on, say, mills, we might have a more effective bang for our buck.
If you're looking at me.
I am.
I would disagree categorically.
Okay, sorry.
I will only add that to that the request was specifically, and we had a mill owner in, and they were requesting it, I think, not for the milling operation, but for their forest, for their logging operation. So we haven't really heard from the
I see.
forest products people.
Very good.
On this, yeah. John, and then we should probably move into our next agenda item.
I just wondered if there's also the possibility of what happened with organic dairy last year where we could say, let's deal with this in the big budget down the road, because it seems like we need a lot more information.
Yeah, I think that my concern about that would be that it's less likely to be prioritized. And given that we don't know the financial picture for next year, and we do know that there is this money, a certain amount of money, not very much, but.
I categorically agree with you.
No, it makes total sense to me too. I'm not recommending this,
But certainly as another option, yes. Okay, so you and I will connect, Mike. You're gonna, we've already reached out, I think, to see about that. And then we shouldn't forget the third piece, which is the other discussion we had from the food bank.
What piece that we're hearing about, Sean?
Yes, right, yeah. Third piece as well. We did get that on, I think.
2 million for the food bank and 2 million for Meals on Wheels.
Too many copies of my agenda here, but I think it did get onto the agenda. Okay, so we need to start a new meeting. We've got